Hi everyone, I'm Stella from Stella's Yarn Universe. This is part 2 of my chubby chick crochet tutorial, which is the ideal amigurumi tutorial for beginners. If you never ever crocheted amigurumi, this one is for you. But if you haven't started with part 1, then I highly recommend you do that. I'll link to it right there in the upper right corner. So watch part 1 first and then get back to part 2 to finish your chubby chick. So as you can see, the little bird is taking shape now. And now we can make the beak, which is very quick and easy. Embroider the eyes and add the little fluffy hair. And we can even start adding this fluff on the tail as well. You can do all of these things in the end, but there is a risk, especially with attaching this hair, these small yarn pieces. There's a risk of pulling the stuffing out, and the same with the embroidery. It's a little hard to hide the ends then. So we'll do everything now. And let's start with the beak. So for the beak, we begin with a slip knot, and you want to leave a long-ish end in the beginning. So I leave it about this long. Then I make a slip knot, and I chain 2. And then all I do is double crochet 1 in the second chain from my hook. Second chain from the hook, double crochet 1, and that's the beak. So this end we also want to leave quite long, so I'll just cut it off here and pull it through. And that's the little beak done. So now we're going to embroider it. It doesn't really matter where the front will be, that's completely up to you. I'll just put the front on the opposite side of the beginning of the round, but in this project it really doesn't matter because it looks the same from all sides. So now we'll need the yarn needle because we need to thread the yarn ends of the beak onto it so that we can attach the beak. And let me just check where it is attached. Between round 7 and 8. So now we need to count the rounds. Of course, you can attach it wherever you like. If you feel like you want it to be somewhere else, only if you want it to be in the same place, then count till round 7. So again, here's the middle, the magic ring that we started with. So that's round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So between 7 and 8, we'll attach the beak. And then I wrote in the pattern between round 7 and 8 across the width of 2 stitches. So what that means I'll show you in a bit. For now we insert one end in a gap there between stitches. So just stitch through somewhere. So here you can see it's in a gap between stitches. And now we'll thread the other end of the beak on our yarn needle. And now, because I wrote across the width of 2 stitches, we count 1 stitch. We're in the middle of a stitch there, so let's just count this as 1 stitch, we just count 2 gaps towards the right or left, it doesn't matter at this point. 1, 2, and that's where we insert the other end. So now our beak is attached across the width of 2 stitches because it's about 2 stitches wide. And these yarn ends now, to secure them, we can just tie them together. So for this you need to insert your index fingers in the work just so you can pull the knot. I just make a double knot so that it won't be loose. Want it to be nice and tight so the beak stays in place where you want it to be. These ends you can just hide in there. We will stuff that shortly anyways. And then next we'll embroider the eyes. So for this you can use either yarn or embroidery floss, it doesn't really matter. For this one I used embroidery floss, but because I wanted the eyes to be more bold, I embroidered like 3 layers. So this time I'll just straight away use yarn, and it's a quite light yarn. I don't know if it's 4-ply or DK. So we'll just need a little bit, maybe 2 hands wide, and we'll thread that on our yarn needle. Usually when I want to make more detailed embroidery, I don't recommend using a yarn needle as this. I actually recommend using a sewing needle with a large eye so that you can thread the embroidery floss or the thin yarn on it. And then I recommend stitching in between through stitches, because this way you have more control over where the embroidery actually goes. But with this one, because that's such a beginner friendly and easy pattern, we just going to stitch through in between stitches. Just wanted to give you a heads up that it's not normally what I recommend, but because this is just an upside down V shape, it's very easy and it will be fine. So in the pattern I wrote embroider the eyes in upside down V shapes on round 6 with 4 stitches space in between. So then you count again the rounds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is the round that they're going to be on, and then 4 stitches in between. So these V shapes are the stitches, as you know. So there are 2 in round 6 on top over the beak that are aligned with the beak. So if we count 1 upside down V shape on each side, then we know where to start with our eyes. So that's where I insert my needle from the inside out, because I want the yarn end to be inside so that I can hide it later. And then I'll just find the next gap, not quite on top but slightly diagonally, because we want it to be embroidered on this round 6. So I'll just go through there to make a small diagonal stitch across the height of round 6. That's 1 stitch done. And then again from the inside I insert my hook there. So not here, because then it would just be too close to where I last inserted my hook. Go through there, and then in the same place here, stitch through to the inside, and that's it. So now we have a little upside down V shape. So now onto the other side. So that's one upside down V shape, 2, 3, 4. So that's the space we want in between. So the other eye begins here. And then again, I find the next gap on top, but diagonally outwards. So I stitch through there, and then I find the next stitch downwards, but not exactly downwards, but slightly diagonally. So this time from the inside out I stitch, and back from the outside in the same spot. So now we have two upside down V shapes that form the eyes. So it's kind of pinching its eyes, maybe because it's laughing or smiling. So now, as we did with the beak, we can secure the eyes by tying both ends together inside our amigurumi. Now I made it hard for myself because I left this end quite short, but that's not a problem because you can squish everything together. And then we want to tie them together, not too loosely but also not too tightly, because there's quite a big space in between both ends, and we don't want there to be any tension that deforms the head. But that looks alright. So you can hide all the ends inside. And now we can add the hair on the top of the head and on the tail. So we need 7 yarn pieces. You don't really need to measure them. I'll just make some loops like so. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's okay. Just divide them into 7 somehow, and then you can cut through the loops. So now you have 7 small pieces of yarn. So 2 of these 7 small pieces of yarn will attach to the top of the head now. So I just insert my hook here, because actually I like them to be not exactly centered. So I insert my hook here in between rod 1 and 2, and then through the middle, the magic ring that we made, and I pulled that nice and tight, so that wasn't easy. So now the hook is coming out in the middle of the magic ring that we began with, and entering in between round 1 and 2. So now I'm taking one of these little pieces of yarn, and the middle of it, I'll just lay it in a loop. So I hold both ends in place, and the middle, the loop, goes onto the hook, and then I pull the hook out. So now we'll have the loop here and the 2 short yarn ends there. So now I insert my hook once again into the loop, and I pick up these 2 ends and pull them through the loop, and then I pull the ends tight, and that's one of the strings attached. Then I insert my hook in the same place to attach another string. So again, both ends pinch together to form a loop. Lay the loop on the hook, oops, like so. Hold the ends in place so it doesn't come off. Pull the yarn through the gap, and then pick up the two ends and pull them through the loop and pull them tight. So that's the top hair attached. So you can do that later or now. I'll just do it now. I'll just cut them short, as short as I want them to be. And the other 5 pieces of yarn are for the little tail. So for the tail, you just want to make sure that it is attached in the center middle. So if you can just go with your hook along the beak, along the top of the head, and then you know here is the center back. It's not necessarily where the end of the round is, because I didn't really measure where I put the beak. So for you, it might be the case as well. So for the little tail, I wrote attach 5 pieces of yarn to round 13 across the width of 3 stitches at the back. So round 13. So again, we can count. This was round 1. Round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And then across 3 stitches. So go for these 3. They seem to be in the center back. So I'll start here and just insert my hook under a stitch in round 13. It doesn't really matter where it comes out, just as long as it's on round 13. And then we do the same we did before on top of the head. Just pull the little piece of yarn through and then pick up these 2 ends and pull them through the loop we just made and pull them tight. So they are 7, so I'll attach 2 in the same spot here. So I'll insert my hook in the same gaps and pull another piece of yarn through and pull the 2 ends through the loops. By the way, this is also how I attach hair to my dolls sometimes, unless they have crocheted hair. Now I move on to the next stitch towards the left, insert my hook under a stitch, and here I'm gonna attach 1. We have 5, I said 7, right? So because we have 5, oops, the ends go through there. Because we have 5, I only attach 1 in there, and now I move on to the 3rd stitch and insert my hook there under a stitch and pull through the remaining 2 pieces of yarn. One and 2. There we go. So when the yarn splits, I'll just cut them short now, a little bit at an angle towards the middle. Oops, that's it. And if the yarn frays a bit, that's actually a good thing. That's going to make it look more fluffy. So that will just happen automatically in time. So that's all done for now. So the next thing that we can do is fill the body, the head and body, with Fibrefill. So I'll just, before we do this, I'll just pull out the stitch marker thread. Not completely, but a little for these few first rounds, just so that it doesn't mess with our Fibrefill. So if you just use your yarn needle and find the contrast yarn, you can pull each of them, each of these small woven in stitches out there. So I'll just leave it there, that should be fine. So now we'll need our Fibrefill, and we need to generously stuff first the head to make sure that's fully stuffed. So when I say generous, I mean it should be nicely filled. It also shouldn't be overstuffed, because sometimes then that kind of deforms the shape that we crocheted. Some more. And just try to distribute it evenly. I always push it through with my thumb. And I turn my amigurumi at the same time, just to make sure that I distribute it evenly. And I think that's enough stuffing. So we can still add more later, but I think that's good for now. So we can continue with, where were we? With round 19. So insert your hook in this loop that you pulled out and pull the loop tight again. And again, mark your stitch with the contrast yarn. So now in round 19, it says double crochet in the next 2 stitches and then decrease. So 1 double crochet in the next stitch, and 1 double crochet in the next stitch. So that's 2 already, and then we decrease. And now the decreasing part gets more tricky, because now our toy is filled. And so what I do is I keep my middle finger in there to hold the stuffing away from the stitch, because otherwise we might crochet some stuffing into the stitch, which is what we're trying to avoid. So again, double crochet in the next, and double crochet in the next, and decrease. And again, double crochet one, and another one, and decrease. One, two, decrease, and one, two, decrease, one, two, decrease, and that's round 19 done. So in round 20 we double crochet one and decrease, and repeat this 6 times in total. So double crochet in the next stitch, and then we decrease. So with each round that gets smaller and smaller, it gets a little trickier, but once you get into the routine of this, it won't be any issue. Oops. Usually the more you crochet, the more you develop your own solutions for the problems that come up along the way of a crochet project. And decrease. Now once more, a double crochet, and a decrease. So that's round 20 done. And now I guess we don't need the contrast thread anymore, so I'll just pull that out there because we only have one round left to go. But before we continue with that, I'll just add a little bit more stuffing just to make sure the bottom is nicely filled. But also you don't want to overstuff the bottom part here, especially if you want your little chick to stand up. If it's too stuffed, then it will probably fall over. So that's enough. And now in round 21 we decrease 6 times, so that's the trickiest of all rounds, I believe. So we reduce the 12 stitches to 6, so all we do is decrease. So we double crochet the first 2 front loops together, then the next 2 front loops. That was the second decrease. Now again, that's the third decrease, and again fourth decrease. So So here, pinching your work together is what might help you make the decreases in such a tiny round. So that was the 5th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's correct. And the last decrease. So now we only have 6 stitches in a round, and that's what we finish with. So now we fasten off with a relatively long end. Well, not really long. This much is enough. And we pull the loop through. So now I'll show you how to fasten off a small round. Also here, these yarn ends have frayed now, which looks much better, I think. Just cut them shorter. So to finish off the last round, if you have such a small round of 6 stitches or even less, the way to do that is you thread the end onto your yarn needle, and now you insert your yarn needle, so you pull the end through the front loops of all 6 stitches. So that's the first one, second stitch, third stitch. So the front loops are easy to find, they're laying here on top anyway. This is the 4th, 5th, and the 6th front loop. Pull them tight, not too tight, especially if you have acrylic. Don't break your yarn accidentally. And now insert the needle in between this round and stitch through somewhere on the bottom would probably be best to weave in the yarn in. So we stitch through here and again pull tight. So now this should be nice and flat, and then we just weave in the yarn end as we usually do with other crochet works as well, just trying to follow the stitch pattern so that the woven in yarn end doesn't look too obvious. So I just see where the stitches go and stitch on top of them just for a few stitches. Depending on who's gonna play with this, you may need to weave in more of the yarn end to make it more secure. So that's the head and body of our little chubby chick done. So all that's left to do are the wings. So for the wings, we start with a magic ring again. So if you need more help with this once more to practice, then you can click on the link in the upper right corner. And once more, we start the first round with 6 double crochet in the magic ring. So again, we insert our hook in the magic ring, pick up the yarn, pull it through, and double crochet. So we double crochet 6, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now this time I won't mark my stitches because it's a very little thing. We're making just these wings. They are only 3 rounds big. So once again in the next round we increase in all 6 stitches. So again, this here is the first stitch of the round, and again I didn't remember to crochet that more loosely, so I'll just loosen that up a bit with my yarn needle and double crochet in the first stitch. So now we can just count until 12, and we always do 2 in the same. So 1, oops, and 2 in the same, then 3 and 4 in the same, 5 and 6 in the same, 7 and 8 in the same, 9 and 10 in the same, and 11 and 12 go in the same. Now in round 3, as we did before, we keep increasing in every other stitch. So we double crochet 1 in the next stitch and 2 in the next stitch. So 1, 2, now that's 3. So we keep counting just so we don't lose count. Just split my yarn here. Now split it again. Alright, so that's my 3rd stitch and my 2nd increase. So then the 4th stitch goes in 1, and number 5 and 6 go in the same. Then stitch number 7 goes in 1 stitch, and 8 and 9 go in the same. Then 10 goes in 1 stitch, and 11 and 12 go in the same. 13 goes in 1, 14, 15 in the same, 16 goes in 1, and 17 and 18 in the same. So now round 4 is not going to be a complete round, and it's going to be quite different. So for round 4 we chain 4, then we double crochet in the next 3 chains starting in the 2nd, and we slip stitch in the next stitch of the round. So we chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and starting in the 2nd chain from our hook, which is this one, we double crochet 1, another one in the next chain, and the 3rd one in the next chain. And now we make a slip stitch in the next stitch here, in the next stitch of the round. So we insert our hook there, pick up the yarn, pull it through, and the slip stitch is simply when you pull this first loop on your hook through the 2nd loop. So you twist your hook and simply pull it through. Then we chain 3 and double crochet in the next 2 chains starting in the 2nd. So this time we chain only 3, and we double crochet in the 2nd chain from our hook right here, and we double crochet 1 in the next chain, which is that one, and once again we slip stitch in the next stitch of the round. Slip like this, and that's the wing already done. So now we leave a long end, so that's very important because we're going to use it to sew the wing on. So we cut a very long end and pull it through. So the left wing is very similar. The first 3 rounds are the same. So 6 double crochet in the magic ring, 3, 4, 5, 6, round 2, increase in all 6 stitches, one and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, 9 and 10, 11 and 12, and now round 3 we increase in every other stitch. So 1 in the first, and then 2 and 3 go in the same stitch, 4 goes in one stitch, 5 and 6 go both in the same, 7 is a single, 8 and 9 go in the same, 10 is a single stitch, 11 and 12 go in the next, 13 is a single, 14 and 15 go together in one, 16 is a single, and 17 and 18 go together in one stitch. So now here is where the difference lies. So this time we start with 3 chains and then double crochet in the second chain from our hook and double crochet in the next chain, and then join this with a slip stitch in the next stitch. And now we chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, double crochet in the second chain from our hook and in the next chain, and another one in the next chain, and then join this right here in the next stitch of the round with a slip stitch. And once again we leave a long yarn end for sewing and we pull this through. So this is the left wing. So now all that's left to do is sewing on the wings. So I'm just starting with the left one here. So we thread the end on our yarn needle, and the first thing I want to do, because this sometimes looks a little wonky, so I do something to make it look more even, this end here. So this tiny stitch there is the slip stitch that we made to connect this feather to the main part of the wing. And now we're going to insert our needle with the yarn end, not in the next stitch, but in the stitch in front of it. So we stitch through there. And now we stitch through the middle of this tiny slip stitch that we made. So in between the front and back loop of that one, and pull it through. So this way we kind of simulate a stitch here and everything looks much smoother. And then we can sew the wing on. So some people like to pin them in place. I won't do it this time because this is quite easy with arms and legs and toys that have many limbs. I'd be more careful just to make sure that it all goes in the right place and you won't have to undo it and start all over. So I wrote in the pattern, sew the wings on each side of the chick on round 8 to 13 with about 14 stitches space across the chest in between. So what this means is, again, we count the rounds. So this where the hairs is round 1, then round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is round 8. So that's the first one that it goes on top. So that will be partly covered by the wing. And then 14 stitches space. So I'm just counting or just having a look where the middle is, which I identify by finding the beak. And then 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then it's going to be 7 on the other side, and that will make 14. So here should be a good place to sew the wing on. So now I just hold the wing in place with my thumb, but feel free to use pins if you want to pin it in place just in case. And then I'll just find a stitch that will be hidden under the wing to go through to sew the wing on. So this stitch goes through the body. Then I go through the next stitch of the wing. And then again I find a stitch just under the wing, but as close to the edge of the wing as possible to stitch through there. And then again I insert it in the next stitch of the wing from the bottom towards the top. That's it. And once again I'll just find the next stitch of the body. And the next stitch of the round. Next stitch of the body. The next stitch of the wing. So I sew each stitch of the wing on. I won't go all around, but I'll do the full upper side of the wing here. And the front of the wing. And sometimes you may push out some Fibrefill when you sew on the wing, so try to avoid that. So that's it. I will leave the rest open. I'll just stitch through somewhere here where the middle of the wing is, roughly. Because then we can secure it by tying the other end, which comes from the middle of the wing, together with this end. And then we can weave both of these ends in. So that's again the same as it is with all crochet work. Just weave the ends in for a few centimeters. depending on how roughly it's going to be played with, you might want to weave in a little bit more of the yarn end. That's one. And the other one. So what I forgot to mention earlier, these two feathers, they point towards the back. So now we'll do the other side, and once again we start with the invisible finish. So we thread the yarn end on our needle, and then we skip the next stitch of the round and insert the needle in the stitch behind it, and then we insert it in between the front and back loop of the last stitch that we made, that little slip stitch there. Pull the end through, and now we have a neat looking finish. So once again, just so the wings will be in the same place on different sides, we count the rounds. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is on top of the 8th round is where the wing goes. And then again, these feathers point backwards, and you can compare the back and adjust it, so it needs to be a bit more tilted towards the top, and that's looking good. Then if I look from the other side again, maybe I'm too far up now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, that should be right. And now I'm just double checking, just counting the stitches that we have space in between the wings. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So that will be right. Now with this wing, the yarn end is right here. So I want to start sewing on the other side of these two little wings. So I just weave the yarn end through the wing. I'm just holding the wing in place now with my fingers, just so I don't have to find the right spot again. But we could have done this before as well. So I'll just weave it through the stitches. So now we can start sewing it on from the top, because we want to sew on the top and then the front part, and that's it. So next I'm just going to find again a gap underneath the wing that will be hidden, because we want the stitches to be as small as possible. And then we'll stitch through the next stitch of the wing and through the body. So obviously always altering between stitching through the body and the wing. And it looks best if we stitch through once through each stitch of the wing, rather than skipping a stitch. So I think this time I'm stitching differently from the top to the bottom, but that's all right. As long as the stitches look nice and even, the result will definitely look good. So I sewed it on up to this point, so I'll do like a few more stitches. So with this, again, you will find your own style on how you want to sew them on, if you in which way you want to go through the stitches, so, to cause a certain effect. So you will figure all these things out and decide what your preferences are. And again, I just stitch through somewhere here underneath the wing, close to its middle. So I'll tie these together. That's not something that you have to do actually. I'm just doing this for extra security. You can also just simply weave in both ends, and that would be it. So now I'll just weave them in. So that should be enough. So our little chubby chick is complete now. Very well done. I hope you enjoyed this little project. If you have any questions, please just leave me a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Also, if you enjoyed this, you may want to subscribe to my channel for more Amigurumi crochet tutorials. So make sure to also ring the bell to turn on notifications so you won't miss any of my future videos. So thank you so much for crocheting along with me. I hope you enjoyed this once again. If you did, feel free to like this video. And yes, thank you so much. If you'd like to continue with another beginner-friendly tutorial, you may want to try my tiny apple pattern. Or if you're looking for something more challenging because this one was too easy, you might want to try and make my little rooster. Happy crocheting! Bye!